Hello, I'm Mr. Berko, and this is the Nelson Math Focus 6 podcast from St. John Fine Arts School. Here is Chapter 6, Lesson 6, Solving Percent Problems. Our goal today is to estimate and calculate percents to solve problems. In our textbook on page 196, there's a story about a grade 6 class that is planning a 300-kilometer bus trip to Blackfoot Crossing Historical Park. The bus ride will take about 4 hours, and the students want to figure out how long and how far they will travel before they pass these landmarks. So here are two landmarks that they are looking for. They're looking for the Welcome to Alberta sign, which occurs at 10% of the way, and a picnic sign that happens at 50% of the way. So obviously their instructor has told them that there are these two landmarks that they're to look for, but the instructor hasn't told them at which point they fall exactly, aside from saying a percentage. So these students are going to try and figure out how far they're going to have to travel before they get to those points. So once again, it's a 4-hour bus ride. There's a Welcome to Alberta sign at 10% and a picnic sign at 50% of the way. Jason, in our textbook, decides to write a line down that is representing the entire trip. So he starts in one side of his paper, and he has 0%, 0 kilometers, and 0 hours. On the other side, he's written 100%, and he knows that it takes 300 kilometers to get there and 4 hours to travel that far. One of the first things that jumps out to me, and I hope jumps out to you, is the 50%. It's pretty easy to find out what half of something is. 10% isn't as easy, even though it's one of the first things we're going to find. We're going to probably try for that 50%. I've drawn a line right in the middle of our line here, and our number line is going to have 50% and half of 300, which is 150, and half of a 4-hour trip, which is 2 hours. So that's quite easy. We realize now that that picnic sign is going to appear when we've traveled 2 hours. But first we're going to find that Welcome to Alberta sign when we're driving, and so we need to find a way to discover where 10% is. Now, one of the things that we can do is, if this is 100%, we can divide it into 10 different portions. You can get out a ruler and you can figure that out, or another thing that I've done is I've divided into halves again. That's going to help us later on when we try to answer our reflecting questions. So since this is a half point here of 150, that's approximately 75 kilometers. And so not half of 75 kilometers, but probably more like a third of it. It would be 10% here. So somewhere around here, not exactly, but somewhere around here is 10% of the trip. And 10% is pretty easy to discover how many kilometers it is, because 10% of 300 is 30. So what we do to that is to take off 1 0. That tells us what a 10% is. And then also we can figure out how many hours we'll be traveling. It's 0.4 hours, so that's 4 hours converted, and 10% of 4 is 0.4. The next step that we have is question A, and it says, how could you use the values for 10% and 50% to estimate the values at other percents on the number line? Well, remember when I said this is going to help us a little bit later on. If you divide 50% in half, you found 25%, and if you divide 75%, if you divide this section here from 50 to 100 in half, you get 75% there. So that's one way that we can do it. We can also multiply this 10% and find out where the 20% and 30% is going to be. There's a bunch of different ways that we can do that. Question B asks, how did drawing the number line help you estimate or check your answers? And that's pretty easy. The visual representation really cues us and allows us to see if we're off or not. So if you see that it's more than half, then it's right on. Thanks for joining.